The sound started as a distant rumble. Then came the sharp crack of trees snapping like matchsticks. Then the roar, like 1,000 freight trains bearing down at once. By the time anyone understood what was happening, it was already too late. The avalanche hit Silverton, Colorado at 8:47 p.m. on February 14, 1885, burying the Sunnyside Mill, 3 abandoned structures, and the town's only schoolhouse under 40 feet of snow. Inside that schoolhouse were 32 children and their teacher, Sarah Walsh. They'd been trapped there for nearly 11 hours, since 10 o'clock that morning when the blizzard started. Now they were buried alive, and the entire town was digging frantically to reach them, knowing deep down they were probably already too late. But to understand how a 13-year-old troublemaker named Tommy Dalton saved everyone, we need to go back 12 hours to when it all began. Tommy Dalton woke up that Valentine's Day morning and made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He was going to skip school. At 13, Tommy was small for his age, quiet when adults were around, but known throughout Silverton as a troublemaker. He wasn't a bad kid. He just had a talent for finding mischief. His mother constantly scolded him for his pranks, and more than once Marshall Fletcher had brought him home by the ear for some scheme or another. But 2 years ago, everything had changed. Tommy's father, Patrick Dalton, had died in a mine collapse at the Highland Mary. Tommy had been 11, and in the 2 years since, he'd tried to be better. Tried to help his mother with chores, work odd jobs after school, be the man of the house. He had 2 little sisters to look after now, Lily, age 7, and Rose, age 5. Tommy adored them both, read them stories every night, protected them from bullies, made them laugh when their mother was sad. Both girls were in school now, which meant Tommy needed to set a good example. But being responsible all the time was exhausting. Today was Friday. The weekend was coming, and Tommy was tired. His mother had left early for her job cleaning rooms at the Grand Imperial Hotel. Tommy's sisters, Lily and Rose, had walked to school with the neighbor children like they did every morning. His mother thought Tommy had left for school ahead of them, like he sometimes did. His sisters thought he'd already gone ahead. But Tommy hadn't gone to school. After everyone else left, he'd gotten dressed, eaten breakfast, grabbed his coat, and slipped out the back door. He'd spend the day exploring near Mineral Creek. Nobody would know. The sky was gray that morning, heavy with the promise of snow. But snow was normal in Silverton in February. The town sat at 9,318 feet elevation, surrounded by the San Juan Mountains. Snow was a fact of life here. What Tommy didn't know was that this wouldn't be normal snow. At the schoolhouse, Sarah Walsh was preparing for her students. She'd been teaching in Silverton for just 8 months, fresh out of teachers' college in Denver. At 22, she was young, pretty, and engaged to Dr. James Carver, the town's beloved physician who'd saved dozens of lives during the diphtheria outbreak the previous winter. The wedding was set for Sunday, just 3 days away. The whole town was buzzing with excitement. Sarah stood at the front of the small schoolhouse, looking at the 32 empty desks. The building sat at the southern edge of town, nestled against the base of Sultan Mountain. Behind it, the slope rose steeply, thousands of feet of rock, trees, and snow. The children began arriving around 8:30. Ranchers' kids and miners' kids, children of merchants and laundresses, some as young as 6 and others as old as 15. They came in bundled against the cold, their breath puffing white in the frigid air. Tommy's little sisters, Lily and Rose, arrived together, holding hands like they always did. Lily was 7, responsible and serious like her big brother. Rose was 5, small and shy, and rarely let go of Lily's hand. By 9 o'clock, everyone was present except one. "Has anyone seen Tommy Dalton?" Sarah asked. Lily and Rose looked at each other uncertainly. Lily raised her hand. "He left the house before us this morning, Miss Walsh. We thought he already came to school." "He wasn't at breakfast," Rose added quietly. "Mama said he'd already gone." Sarah frowned and made a note in her attendance book. Tommy Dalton, playing hooky again most likely. She'd have to speak with his mother about it after school. She had no idea that Tommy's absence would soon become the only thing standing between life and death for everyone in this room, including his 2 little sisters. By 10 o'clock, Tommy was 2 miles outside town, following Mineral Creek. The snow had picked up, thick, heavy flakes, but Tommy wasn't worried. He'd grown up in these mountains. Then the wind changed. What had been a gentle snowfall became something else entirely. The wind howled down from the peaks, driving the snow horizontal. Visibility dropped to nothing. The temperature plummeted. In minutes, the world became a white void. Tommy realized he'd made a terrible mistake. He couldn't see more than a few feet. The creek, his landmark, had vanished. He was lost. He started running back toward town, but in a whiteout, every direction looks the same. After stumbling through the deepening snow for what felt like hours, Tommy's foot caught on something and he fell hard, sliding down a small embankment. When he stopped rolling, he found himself at the entrance to the old Sunnyside mine. The same mine where his father had worked. The same mine where Tommy and Charlie used to sneak in for adventures. "If you're ever lost in a storm," his father had said once, "find shelter. Any shelter, even an old mine. Just don't go too deep. There might be bad air or cave-ins, but the entrance will keep you alive." Tommy crawled into the mine entrance, out of the screaming wind. In the schoolhouse, Sarah Walsh made a decision that would save 32 lives. When the blizzard hit at 10 o'clock, visibility outside dropped to zero within minutes. The wind shook the small building, and snow began forcing its way through gaps in the walls and around the windows. Sarah immediately knew they couldn't send the children home. They'd have to wait out the storm together. "Everyone away from the windows," she called out. "Gather in the center of the room. We're going to have an indoor recess until the storm passes." The younger children were frightened, some crying, but Sarah kept them busy, singing songs, telling stories, playing quiet games. The older students helped, keeping the little ones distracted. Hours passed. The storm didn't let up. If anything, it got worse. Sarah had never seen anything like it. The world outside had completely disappeared into white. The wind howled like a living thing. Snow piled up against the windows until the glass was barely visible. By noon, the children were asking when they could go home. Sarah had no answer. She could barely see 10 feet past the windows. Sending them out into that would be sending them to their deaths. By 2 o'clock, the storm had been raging for 4 hours. The temperature inside the schoolhouse had dropped dangerously. Sarah had the older boys feeding coal into the small stove, trying to keep the room warm. But coal was running low. Sarah looked at her students, 32 children, ranging from 6 years old to 15. Some were trying to be brave, others were crying quietly. All of them were cold and frightened and asking for their parents. "We're going to be fine," Sarah told them with more confidence than she felt. "The storm will pass soon, and then we'll get you all home safely. Until then, we stay together, we stay warm, and we stay calm." But Sarah was terrified. Back in town, their parents must be frantic with worry, and she had no way to tell them that their children were safe, no way to get word out through the whiteout. All she could do was wait and pray the storm would end before the coal ran out. Tommy huddled at the mine entrance, watching the storm rage. And as the hours passed, he began to notice something terrifying. The snow was accumulating at an alarming rate. By 1 o'clock, it was 3 feet deep. By 2 o'clock, 4 feet. The drifts were piling up against rocks and trees, building higher and higher. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "The most dangerous avalanches don't happen during the storm, son. They happen after. When you get warm weather that melts the surface, then a cold snap that freezes it into ice, then heavy snow on top of that ice. That's when the mountain lets go." Tommy's blood ran cold. 2 weeks ago, Silverton had seen unseasonably warm weather. Then, last week, a bitter cold snap. That meant ice, a hard layer of ice on every slope, and now heavy snow was piling on top of it on Sultan Mountain, right above the schoolhouse. By 2:30, there was nearly 5 feet of snow. Tommy stared up at the invisible mountain, doing the calculations. 5 feet of snow, on ice, on a steep slope, with the schoolhouse directly at the base. "Lily and Rose," he whispered, "my sisters. Miss Walsh, all my friends, they're all in there." That's when he noticed the old miner's shelter near the entrance, half collapsed but still standing. Inside, he found snowshoes hanging on the wall, covered in dust but intact. And then, as if answering his prayers, the storm suddenly lessened. The wind died down, visibility improved. It was a brief lull, maybe his only chance. Tommy strapped on the snowshoes and set out for town. The 2-mile journey through 5 feet of snow took over half an hour. Tommy's legs burned, his lungs screamed, but he kept going. He had to warn them. He reached Main Street just after 3 o'clock. Men were gathered outside the marshal's office. Tommy burst through the door, gasping, "Marshal Fletcher, you have to listen." Fletcher turned, his face darkening. "Tommy Dalton. Where in blazes have you been? Your mother's been worried sick, and you skipped school? Marshal, please." Tommy was nearly crying. "The schoolhouse. We have to get those kids out now." Mayor Hendricks stepped forward. "Boy, calm yourself. The storm's letting up. We'll send folks to collect the children once it's safe." "No, you don't understand." Tommy grabbed Fletcher's arm. "There's 5 feet of snow out there, 5 feet on top of ice. 2 weeks ago it was warm, then last week it froze. My pa taught me. When you get snow on ice like that, the mountain lets go." Fletcher pulled his arm free. "Son, I appreciate your concern, but that whole slope is going to come down. All that snow, it can't hold on that ice. It's going to slide. It's going to bury the schoolhouse." "Your father was a good man, Tommy," the mayor said, "but you're just a boy. We can't risk sending men out based on a child's fears. It's not fear, it's science. My pa taught me." Tommy looked around at the skeptical faces. Please just let me go get them. I have snowshoes, I can make it." "Absolutely not," Fletcher said firmly. "You're going home right now. Your mother's worried sick. We'll bring the children home safely within the hour. There's no avalanche coming. But the ice layer—" "Enough." Fletcher's tone was final. "Jim, escort young Tommy home." A deputy took Tommy by the arm. Tommy looked back desperately. "You're making a mistake. When that mountain lets go, home, Tommy. Now." Outside, the snow had started falling harder again. The brief lull was ending. Tommy let himself be led through the streets, his mind racing. They didn't believe him. No one believed him. And there was no way he could reach the schoolhouse now. The whiteout was returning. Even with snowshoes, he'd never make it through town and up to the schoolhouse in these conditions. When they reached his house, Tommy's mother burst out and wrapped him in her arms, sobbing. The deputy explained where he'd been found and departed. His mother held him. "Don't you ever scare me like that again." She pulled him inside. "You're frozen. Get by the fire." Tommy stood by the window, watching the storm rage back to life. The brief lull was over. The whiteout had returned, and somewhere out there, 32 children and Miss Walsh sat at the base of Sultan Mountain while snow piled up on ice above them. He tried to warn the adults. They dismissed him. His mother was in the kitchen making tea. Lily and Rose were playing quietly by the fire, scared by the storm. Tommy stared out at the swirling white, feeling utterly helpless. Then, like a lightning bolt, a memory hit him. The mine shaft. 6 months ago, before Charlie Henderson had moved away, the 2 boys had been exploring the old sealed Sunnyside mine. They'd found an old ventilation passage that led upward. Curious, they'd climbed the rickety ladder to see where it went. They'd pushed up through the loose floorboards and found themselves inside the schoolhouse, in the back room, behind a heavy bookshelf. It had been their secret passage, their way to sneak into the schoolhouse at night and play pranks. Tommy and Charlie had spent months having fun with that old shaft. One night, they'd found Miss Walsh's test papers sitting on her desk and hid them in the supply closet. The next morning had been glorious. Miss Walsh had searched everywhere, increasingly frantic, while 32 students sat in confused silence. Another time, they'd sawed 6 inches off Billy Hutchins's chair. Billy was the biggest bully in school, always picking on smaller kids. The memory of Billy crashing to the floor still made Tommy smile. But Charlie had moved to Denver last summer, and Tommy hadn't been back to that mine since. In fact, he'd heard rumors. Talk around town that there'd been some kind of cave-in in the old Sunnyside tunnels. Nobody went in there anymore. Tommy didn't even know if the passage to the ventilation shaft was still open. The whole route could be blocked by tons of rock, but it was the only chance. So the secret belonged to Tommy alone. And suddenly, that secret became the most important thing in the world. The mine shaft led directly into the schoolhouse. From below, Tommy could reach them, not from above through the storm, but from underneath through the mine. Tommy's mind raced. Could he make it back to the mine in this storm? The snowshoes were gone, but maybe he could manage. Could he get past whatever might be hibernating in that mine? His father had always warned about bears. Could he climb that old ladder? It had been 6 months. What if it had rotted? But what choice did he have? Tommy looked at his mother in the kitchen. She'd already lost his father to the mines. If Tommy went into that mine and didn't come back, it would destroy her. She'd have lost her husband and her only son. She'd be alone with just Lily and Rose, but Lily and Rose weren't home. They were trapped in that schoolhouse. His sisters, his baby sisters who trusted him, who looked up to him, who he read stories to every night. Lily, with her serious face and protective nature. Rose, with her shy smile and the way she always held someone's hand when she was scared. They were buried under 40 feet of snow right now, probably terrified, probably crying for him, for their big brother to save them. And he was the only person in the entire town who knew how to reach them. Tommy's hands clenched into fists. He thought about Rose's small voice that morning. He wasn't at breakfast. She'd been worried about him even then, and now she needed him. All 32 children needed him. Little Mary Chen, who played dolls with Rose, Billy Hutchins' little sister Emma, who Lily walked to school with every day. But more than anyone, Lily and Rose needed their brother. Tommy made his decision. He waited until his mother's back was turned, then he slipped out the front door into the storm. Rotted? What if it broke? Tommy pressed his forehead against the cold glass. Every option was dangerous. Every choice could end with him dead in the snow or buried in a collapsed mine. But if he did nothing, all his friends would die. Miss Walsh would die, and he'd have to live the rest of his life knowing he could have saved them but was too scared to try. Tommy looked at his mother, who was making tea in the kitchen. She'd already lost his father to the mines. If Tommy went into that mine and didn't come back, it would destroy her. And Lily and Rose, they'd grow up without a father or brother. They were so little, they needed him. But if he didn't go, and the avalanche came... Among those 32 children trapped in the schoolhouse, some of them were Lily and Rose's friends. Little Mary Chen, who played dolls with Rose, Billy Hutchins's little sister Emma, who Lily walked to school with every day. If Tommy did nothing, those children would die. All of them would die. Tommy made his decision. He waited until his mother's back was turned. Then he slipped out the front door into the storm. The journey back to the mine was a nightmare. Without snowshoes, Tommy sank up to his waist with every step. The wind battered him. The cold bit through his clothes. He could barely see 3 feet ahead. But Tommy had grown up in these mountains. His father had taught him to navigate by feel, by instinct. He knew these slopes, and he kept going. By the time he reached the mine entrance, it was past 4 o'clock. He was exhausted, frozen, and terrified. But he was there. Tommy grabbed a lantern from the old shelter and entered the mine. The tunnel was everything he remembered. Cold, dark, echoing with dripping water. He moved slowly, following the main shaft until he reached the branch that led to the ventilation passage. That's when he heard it. A low rumble from deeper in the tunnel. Tommy raised his lantern and saw, about 20 feet ahead, a massive, dark shape against the wall. A bear. He'd woken it from hibernation. For a moment, boy and bear just stared at each other. The animal stood up, enormous, filling the tunnel. It sniffed the air, took a step toward Tommy. Tommy remembered his father's advice. Don't run. Back away slow. Make yourself small. Then he heard something from ahead, from the direction of the ventilation shaft. A sound that made his decision for him. Children crying, muffled, distant, but unmistakable. The schoolhouse. They were right above him, and among those voices, somewhere in that terrified chorus, were Lily and Rose. Tommy did something crazy. He started yelling at the top of his lungs, making as much noise as he could. The bear, startled by the sudden racket in its den, backed away. Tommy kept yelling, kept making noise, and slowly, carefully, sidled past the confused animal. Once past the bear, Tommy ran. The tunnel sloped upward. The children's voices grew louder, though now they sounded different. Frightened. Screaming. "Lily!" Tommy shouted as he ran. "Rose! Hold on! I'm coming!" Then he heard it. That deep rumble he'd been dreading all day. The avalanche was coming. Tommy ran faster, racing against time. He reached the base of the ventilation shaft just as the mountain above seemed to explode with sound. The roar was deafening even down here. The walls of the mine shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Tommy grabbed the ladder and started climbing. The ladder was old, rotten in places. Rungs broke under his weight, but Tommy kept climbing, driven by pure desperation. Up through the darkness, toward the voices above. He pushed against the trap door at the top. It wouldn't budge. The bookshelf. Tommy had forgotten about the heavy bookshelf that sat on top of the trap door. He braced his back against the door and pushed with his legs against the ladder. The old wood creaked. The bookshelf scraped. Tommy pushed harder. The trap door opened an inch, 2 inches. "Help!" Tommy screamed. "Help!" Someone pushed the bookshelf. Above him, in the schoolhouse, chaos reigned. The children were screaming. Sarah Walsh was trying to keep them calm. Then, through all the noise, she heard a voice, a boy's voice, coming from the back room, coming from beneath the floor. "Behind the bookshelf," the voice shouted. "Move the bookshelf." Sarah ran to the back room. Several older boys followed her. Together, they shoved the heavy bookshelf aside. There, in the floor, a trap door was pushing up. They grabbed it and pulled. The door swung open, revealing a dark shaft, and climbing up from the darkness, covered in dirt and breathing hard, was Tommy Dalton. "Tommy?" Sarah gasped. "How did you... What is this?" Tommy pulled himself up through the opening, his eyes frantically scanning the room. "Lily! Rose! Where are you?" 2 small figures pushed through the crowd of children. Lily and Rose threw themselves at their brother, sobbing. Tommy grabbed them both, holding them so tight they could barely breathe. "You're okay," he gasped. "You're okay." Thank God. "Tommy, what's happening?" Lily cried. There was a big noise and everything shook and... "No time," Tommy said, looking up at Sarah. "The avalanche just hit. We're buried. We have to go now. Everyone down the shaft. There's a mine below. It's the only way out." "A mine? Tommy, I can't send children into a mine." "Miss Walsh, we're under tons of snow. Can't you hear? This is the only way out." He looked down at his sisters. "I'm getting you out of here. Both of you, I promise." That's when Sarah realized the truth. The terrible noise had stopped. The building had stopped shaking. And now there was a new sound. Or rather, the absence of sound. The wind was gone. The storm sounds were gone, because they were under 40 feet of snow. "Oh, God," Sarah whispered. Then she grabbed the nearest child. "Everyone, listen to me. We're going down the shaft. Stay calm, hold hands, and follow Tommy. Don't let go of each other." The children were terrified, but Sarah's voice was firm. Tommy went down first to guide them from below. Then he called up, "Send the smallest ones first." One at a time. He helped each child down the ladder, his hands shaking. Finally, he saw 2 familiar faces appear at the top of the shaft. "Lily, you go first," Tommy called up. "I'll catch you. Rose, you're right behind her. I've got you both." Lily climbed down the rickety ladder, her face pale but determined. Tommy guided her feet to each rung. "That's it. You're doing great. Almost there." Rose was crying as she started down, her small hands gripping the ladder so tight her knuckles were white. "I'm scared, Tommy." "I know, Rosie, but I'm right here. I won't let anything happen to you, I promise." One by one, all the children made it down. Sarah counted them as they descended. 20, 25, 30, 31, 32. All the children were down, including Lily and Rose, who stayed close to Tommy's sides. Sarah looked at the shaft. It was so dark down there, so terrifying. She could hear Tommy's voice calling up, "Miss Walsh, come on, we have to go." Sarah took a breath and started climbing down. Above ground, the town of Silverton was in chaos. Throughout the day, parents had been trapped in their homes, unable to reach the schoolhouse through the blizzard. They'd watched the snow pile higher and higher, knowing their children were stuck at the far end of town with no way to get to them. The whiteout had been complete. Zero visibility for hours. When the avalanche hit, parents heard the distant roar even from their homes. They knew immediately what it meant, and they knew where Sultan Mountain's avalanche path led. The moment the avalanche stopped, every able-bodied person grabbed whatever tools they could find and ran toward the south end of town. The site where the schoolhouse had been was now just a massive field of debris. Snow, rocks, trees, and shattered lumber mixed into a solid mass 40 feet deep. Marshal Fletcher organized the men into teams. They started digging frantically. Dr. James Carver was there, his face ashen, calling Sarah's name. Parents were sobbing, calling for their children they hadn't seen or heard from since they'd left for school that morning, nearly 11 hours ago. Everyone was digging, clawing at the snow with their bare hands when their tools broke. "My babies are in there," one mother screamed. "Please, please find them." "Keep digging," Fletcher shouted. "They might have air pockets." Keep digging. But everyone knew the truth. The schoolhouse had been buried for too long, and even if the building had somehow stayed intact under 40 feet of snow and debris, the air inside would be running out fast. Tommy's mother arrived, already crying. Tommy was missing again, and now the schoolhouse was buried. She knew in her heart where her son had gone. The hours crawled by. They dug and dug, 2 feet down, 4 feet, 6 feet. Still no sign of the building. By 7 o'clock, they'd been digging for nearly 2 hours. Dr. Carver finally stopped and spoke the words everyone was thinking, but no one wanted to say. "It's been too long," he said quietly. "Even if they survive the avalanche itself, the air—" His voice broke. "There's no air down there." After 2 hours, he couldn't finish. The digging slowed. Parents kept working, but their movements became mechanical, hopeless. They were no longer digging to save their children. They were digging to recover bodies. Marshal Fletcher had tears streaming down his face as he swung his pick. Mayor Hendricks sat in the snow, his head in his hands. Tommy's mother knelt in the snow, praying. They kept digging, because what else could they do? By 8 o'clock, they finally broke through. Someone's shovel punched into a void, the interior of the schoolhouse. Men widened the hole frantically, then dropped down inside with lanterns. The schoolhouse was crushed, the roof partially collapsed, furniture smashed, and it was empty. "They're not here," someone shouted up. "There's nobody here." Confusion, horror. Had the avalanche swept them away somehow? Had they been thrown from the building? And then someone heard it. A sound from the north, from the direction of town. Children's voices. Marshal Fletcher climbed out of the hole and turned. In the distance, coming through the snow, he saw figures. Small figures. Children, running and stumbling through the deep snow, and behind them, a woman in a dark dress. "Sarah!" Dr. Carver screamed and started running toward them. The parents heard, they turned, they saw their children, and then everyone was running, screaming names, crying, laughing, stumbling through the snow toward the impossible sight of their children alive. Tommy emerged from between 2 buildings, his arms around both his sisters. Lily and Rose were clinging to him, one on each side, all 3 of them covered in dirt from the mine. His mother saw them and let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. She ran harder than she'd ever run in her life. "Tommy! Lily! Rose!" She crashed into all 3 of them at once, pulling them into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. She held them so tight they could barely breathe, crying into their hair, saying their names over and over. "You're alive! You're alive! Oh, God, you're all alive!" "Mama, Tommy saved us," Lily said, her voice muffled against her mother's shoulder. "He came up through the floor. It was so scary, but he knew the way, and he got us out." "He promised he'd get us home," Rose sobbed, "and he did. He kept his promise." All around them, other parents were doing the same, grabbing their children, checking for injuries, crying with relief and joy. The air was filled with the sound of reunions, of parents calling their children's names, of laughter mixed with tears. Dr. Carver reached Sarah and swept her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "How?" he kept saying. "How? How? Sarah was crying and laughing at the same time. Tommy Dalton. There's a mine shaft under the schoolhouse. He came up through it. He saved us. He saved all of us. Marshal Fletcher pushed through the crowd and found Tommy, still being held by his mother with Lily and Rose pressed against his sides. The marshal knelt down so he was eye level with the boy. The mine shaft, Fletcher said. You knew about it. How? Tommy looked down, suddenly embarrassed. I used to sneak in, at night, with Charlie Henderson. We'd play pranks. I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want to get in trouble. He looked up. I tried to warn you about the Avalanche. I tried to tell you, but nobody believed me. Fletcher's face crumpled. I know, son. I know, and I'm sorry. I should have listened to you. I tried to warn you, Tommy said quietly, looking down at Lily and Rose, who were still clinging to him. The mountain did let go, just like my pa said it would, and if I hadn't gone, if I hadn't remembered that mine shaft, he couldn't finish. The thought of what would have happened to his sisters was too terrible. But you did remember, his mother said, her voice thick with emotion. You saved them. You saved your sisters. You saved everyone. You saved my life, little Emma Morrison said, one of Lily's friends. Billy Hutchins stepped forward, and the same bully whose chair Tommy had sawed months ago. You saved my sister, too. Thank you, Tommy. Thank you so much. Sarah Walsh walked over and knelt beside Tommy. You could have stayed safe in your home. You could have done nothing. But you went into that mine in the middle of a blizzard, past a bear, through a cave-in, up a ladder that could have collapsed at any moment, to save people who might have already been dead. Tommy, you're the bravest person I have ever met. And those two little girls, she gestured to Lily and Rose, they're the luckiest sisters in the world to have a brother like you. Tommy's mother gasped. A bear? A cave-in? Tommy, you could have. She couldn't finish, just pulled all three of her children closer. She'd almost lost all of them, her son in the mine, her daughters in the schoolhouse, but somehow, miraculously, they were all here, all safe. I had to, Mama, Tommy said quietly. Lily and Rose were in there. I couldn't just leave them. Tommy looked around at all the faces, his friends, their parents, the marshal, the mayor, the doctor. All of them were looking at him like he was something special, like he was a hero. But Tommy just felt tired and grateful and relieved that his stupid pranks from months ago had accidentally saved everyone's life. I just remembered something my pa always said, Tommy said quietly. He said the mountains don't forgive mistakes, but he also said that sometimes the things we think are useless, the things we think are just for fun, sometimes those things end up mattering more than we ever imagined. He looked at Sarah. I thought that mine shaft was just for sneaking in and playing pranks. But it turned out to be the most important thing I've ever known. Marshal Fletcher stood up and addressed the crowd. I think we all learned something today. We learned to listen when someone, even a 13-year-old boy, tries to warn us about danger, and we learned that Tommy Dalton is a hero. The crowd erupted in cheers. Tommy felt his face burning with embarrassment, but also with pride. He'd done it. He'd saved everyone. And maybe, just maybe, his father would be proud of him. The Avalanche of February 14th, 1885 became known as the Valentine's Day Miracle. The entire town of Silverton celebrated not just that no one had died, but that they'd been saved by one of their own. Sarah Walsh and Dr. James Carver were married the following Sunday as planned, but with one change to the ceremony. Tommy Dalton walked Sarah down the aisle, since her father couldn't make the journey through the snow-packed passes. The reception was held in the Grand Imperial Hotel, with the entire town in attendance. Everyone wanted to celebrate not just a wedding, but the miracle that all 33 people had survived. The schoolhouse was eventually rebuilt months later in a different location, far from the base of Sultan Mountain, with a proper emergency exit built into the design, inspired by the mine shaft that had saved everyone's lives. Tommy never got in trouble for his pranks again. In fact, the town council officially pardoned him for all past mischief in light of extraordinary heroism. His mother framed the official document and hung it on the wall. Tommy grew up to become a mining engineer, specializing in safety protocols and rescue procedures. He revolutionized mine safety throughout Colorado implementing ventilation systems and escape routes that saved countless lives. He never forgot that the knowledge his father had given him, knowledge about mines and snow and mountains, had saved an entire generation of children. He also never played another prank in his life. As he later told his own children, "I used up my lifetime supply of mischief in one night." And it turned out that mischief saved more lives than all my serious efforts ever did. When Tommy was 63 years old, Silverton dedicated a bronze statue in the town square. It showed a young boy climbing up from a mine shaft, reaching his hand back down to help others. The inscription read, "Thomas Dalton, who knew the secret paths and used them to save us all." Sometimes the troublemakers become the heroes. February 14, 1885. Tommy died peacefully in his sleep in 1937 at the age of 65. His funeral was attended by over 400 people, including all 32 students he'd saved that Valentine's Day in 1885. They were adults now, with children and grandchildren of their own. Many of them had named their sons Thomas in his honor. His sisters, Lily and Rose, were there too, both elderly women now. They sat in the front row, holding hands the way they'd held hands that terrible night when they thought they'd lost their brother forever. They'd spent their whole lives telling anyone who would listen about the day their big brother became a hero. Sarah Carver spoke at his funeral. She was 74 years old, her hair white, her face lined with age, but her voice was strong as she told the story one more time. "Tommy Dalton was a troublemaker," she said. "He played pranks. He skipped school. He snuck into places he shouldn't have been. And because of all that, because of those pranks and that mischief, he knew something that no one else in town knew. He knew a secret passage that saved 33 lives." She paused, looking out at the crowd. "I think about that sometimes. About how the things we think are foolish or wrong sometimes turn out to be the very things that save us. Tommy thought he was just playing. He thought he was just being a kid. But God had a plan for all that mischief. God was preparing him for the moment when he'd need to be brave." Sarah's voice grew thick with emotion. "Tommy came up through that floor like an angel from below, and he led us through darkness into light. He was 13 years old, and he was the bravest person I've ever known." The lesson of Silverton isn't just about avalanches or bravery or secret passages. It's about how the most unlikely people sometimes become heroes, how the troublemaker becomes the savior, how the knowledge we gain when we're just playing and exploring can become the knowledge that saves lives. Tommy Dalton was buried next to his father, Patrick Dalton, in the Silverton Cemetery. A single headstone marks both graves, father and son. Both knew the mountains, both saved lives. And every year, on February 14th, the people of Silverton gather at that statue in the town square and tell the story again. The story of the boy who skipped school, played pranks, knew a secret, and saved everyone. If you enjoyed this incredible true story of courage and unexpected heroism, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We have so many more tales from the Old West that will inspire and amaze you. Click that video right there to hear another story of ordinary people who became heroes when it mattered most. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.